morning friends, and welcome back once again to NPTEL online certification course on Indian poetry in English. In the previous lectures, we had been discussing some of the poets who first were professors and then they were poets. Now, in this series, we had discussed the impressionistic form of Indian English poetry. And today once again, we are going to discuss one more important figure, namely Bibhu Padhi, who also was a professor of English, and then poetry was a passion for him. Before we go into the poetic world of Bibhu Padhi, it would actually be very significant if we come to know about who Bibhu Padhi is and what actually are the traits of his poetry. My dear friends, it has been seen that those poets who were actually born in an independent India had many other things to talk about or to delineate than those who were born in pre-independent India. And in this category, Bibhu Padhi is also one such name who was born in independent India, especially in the year 1951 in Orissa, in a small town named Cuttack. Now, it has been seen that a majority of poets who belong to Orissa, they try to follow the footsteps of the great Jayant Mahapatra. And in Bibhu's world also, you will find the same sort of inkling, but then there is a difference. We shall try to find out those differences. Bibhu was actually born on 16th January 1951, and then he had his education in Cuttack only. It is said that majority of Bibhu's life was spent in Cuttack, and then he took up a teaching position in various parts only of Orissa. So, the poet is some way or the other soaked, drenched in Orisian landscape, Orisian reality. And when we talk about Orisian reality, naturally the image that comes to our mind is poverty, drought. Rains have been a consistent theme in majority of the poems of Bibhu Padhi. Right from the beginning, Padhi was influenced by some major poets, namely Pablo Neruda, then Guispe, and then Angarity, Octavio Paz, Cesare Pavese, Salvatore Quasimodo, Emily Dickinson, James Merrill Whitman, and William Stafford. So, Padhi has admitted in many of the interviews that he was actually influenced by many British as well as many American poets. Padhi, apart from being a poet, is also a critic, a translator, and poet of course he is. About Padhi it is said, and Bruce King in his famous book mentions, that unlike Mahapatra, Padhi is an insider. The focus is that Padhi is a Brahmin, and one can find the way Padhi's poems move, rotate, and the way Padhi tries to create a sort of kaleidoscopic effect, but majority of his poems move around Orissa, Orisian landscape. Like Mahapatra, he is also time and again found moving in the corridors of the past, and there is a sort of patterning in the poetry of Padhi, and the patterns that we come across Padhi's world is of everyday realities. So, once we have a discussion or once we explore the world of Padhi, will actually come to know about the various patterns that Padhi follows. Padhi has to his collection quite a good number of poetry collections, fine, to his credit, quite a good number of poetry collections, beginning with Going to Temple, which came out in the year 1988. Then came A Und Elsewhere, Lines from a Legend, Painting the House, Games the Heart Must Play, Living with Lorenzo, Choosing a Place, Migratory Days, Brief Seasons, Magic Ritual, then Midnight Diary, and one that came out only this year is A Friendship with Time. Now, it is very difficult to unravel the mysteries surrounding in all the poetry collections, but we shall take up some of the poems from some of his major collections and then try to find out what sort of a poet Bibhu Padhi is. In fact, if I have to make an analysis of Padhi as a poet, I will consider Padhi primarily a love poet and then anything else. But then Padhi's poetic pen has actually spilled lines which can be considered to be very immortal in terms of composing serious things in a very subtle and very simple manner. Now, what are actually the characteristics of Padhi's poems? As I have been saying, that majority of poets from Orissa, they always try to imitate or follow the footsteps of Jayant Mahapatra, because Jayant Mahapatra is a big name, especially for the people of Orissa and to a greater extent to Indian readers at large. So, in Padhi's word also we find Orissa in the background. But then one thing that makes Padhi distinct is the spontaneous quality of his poetry. His lines are very spontaneous. One may not need to make any effort in order to understand the meaning of it. The flow of the lines are very natural, just like a stream, just like a river. The language used in Padhi is very subtle, and Padhi tries to mix or amalgamate reality, but a major portion of the reality is related to the memory. So, Padhi unfolds a sort of memory. When we read the poems of Padhi, we will find that there is always one invisible you, and this you, who the you is, it is very difficult to interpret and explore. But then there is always an invisible you to whom Padhi has addressed majority of his poems. This you can be anyone, this you can be a poetic persona as well. Since Padhi's world is very spontaneous, we do not find much of artificiality, because artificiality and verbosity, they appear quite inimical if understood from the angle of Padhi. They in a way obfuscate the pure intention of Padhi the poet. We can also find environmental degradation in majority of his poems, but then for that we have to wait for some time before we start unraveling the gems that Padhi actually mentions in his poetic world. Let us take one poem, some of the lines of one poem, which is Listening Through the Rain. As I have been saying that rain has been used consecutively in many of the poems, sometimes waiting for rains, sometimes the beauty and the benignity of rains, sometimes rain has been used very metaphorically, as in this poem we can find, it is raining in Cuttack once again, the rain that arrives so gently that it can scarcely be heard through my son's dream songs. The poet here actually tries to show two phases. The poet tries to show two phases of the city, that is Cuttack, and he actually reminisces the rain, and then as the poem proceeds further, as he himself says that it can scarcely be heard through my son's dream songs, the harsh songs of motor cars crowding the road, once on such afternoon in July, your limp voice drifted into my room through the rain, and I can almost remember your sweet voice in the July of one distant echoing year. So there is a memory being unfolded here, but then the poet actually keeps rain in the background, and then he talks about the city life, and then he also talks about the noises, and then he also seems to miss the sound of the rain, but at the same time he not only misses the sound of the rain, he actually also misses one of his loved ones, one of his true ones, to whom he says that everything had changed, but still in the July of one distant echoing year, in my memory I keep on hearing the sweet sound. Your limp voice drifted into my room. I mean, if we analyze other poems also, we can find that there are some other themes also scattered in the poetic realm of Padhi. Say for example, one can also come across the small society of birds, but then Padhi in a way is a realist. It appears, if one has a look at the lines of Padhi's poems, one can find that they appear as things come quite naturally to people. I am reminded of how poetry should come as the leaves come quite naturally to a tree, and so is the case with Padhi also. Padhi talks of death, illness, he also talks about anniversaries, then he also talks about many relations loved, lost. At times Padhi is also confounded at the relationships which actually come to haunt his mind. He also gives us a picture of the middle class, fine lower middle class people, and then he is confined. So, one thing that one can find in the world of Padhi is that Padhi does not want to move outside Orissa. So, the landscape is Orissa, and majority of his poems have in their background Orissa landscape, and then but then through that also Padhi actually does not want his imagination to stop, but then he wants the imagination once again to explore newer lands, newer realities. But then reality cannot be ignored, reality cannot be missed. If we come to talk about the poetic process of Padhi, because Padhi's world has got a sort of variety. So, what he said in one of his interviews to Mahuya Vaumik actually is an eye opener. What he says, I wait for a poem to come, perhaps wait for a title as well. I wait for a poem to come, perhaps wait for a title, at some other time the first or the last line. The first line stays with me for a week or so, and then it asks me to put itself down on the page. Earlier, I used to write my poems in longhand, but now I write it on the computer. Right now, I have a title for a poem as well as its first two lines. I think when I sit down to write, the rest of the poem will follow. Meaning thereby, he wants a thought to sink, a thought to simmer, so that it actually takes a poetic form. And then as he says that he is also a witness to the change. Earlier he wrote in his own hand, but now he has been typing on the computer. Now, one of his very significant chapbooks entitled Living with Lorenzo, it actually tells us about the poet's imagination of how if he could have lived with Lorenzo. Now, who is this Lorenzo? This Lorenzo is D.H. Lawrence, but he actually had worked for quite a long time on D.H. Lawrence, and then he composed a chapbook and he titled it Living with Lorenzo, which has got 14 poems. It is a sort of biography which the Indian poet wanted Lawrence's biographers to scribble. In a way, he wants that the biographers of Lorenzo should write something in colorful language to afflict the departed novelist who strongly believed any relation based on blood. Now, I have been saying that Padhi is a realist, and that is why, like D.H. Lawrence, he also believes in the relationship of blood to be more powerful than one founded on the dictates of the society. Now, he begins this chapbook with celebrations, and he questions, through this he questions our modern ways of living and morbid fascination towards glorification. He also asks Lorenzo to enter into a camaraderie with him, into a sort of friendship with him. The chapbook is thin, but it is suffused with meaning, and one can enjoy a lot while reading Living with Lorenzo. We can also take some poems from his very first collection, that is Going to Temple. And there we find how the poet always tries to create a sort of conflict between consciousness and unconsciousness, and for that he takes some of the birds as a medium, and here it is the poem entitled Pigeons. And he says, the poem begins with, they embody a consciousness that shines among light grey rocks. In their bodies, old stories of flight repeat themselves. Old stories of flight repeat themselves, refresh memory. During the long Indian afternoons, they rest upon our polished floors, their bodies refracting the warmth of close contact, their small heads forming a community of wisdom, a picture of extreme importance is seen. So, through this pigeon, the poet actually also in a way tries to compare human life and says that how these pigeons, they through their bodies, they actually tell us old stories of flight, of struggle, fine, of climbing, repeating themselves, refreshing memory, a picture that comprehends everything, all things contemporary and long past. Though he talks about pigeons, but then he talks about humans' strive, humans' excellence, and then how our memory can lead us to. But before our eyes gain their fixed look, and our ennui its pale green stare, they rise up, holy and untouched, to disappear among a history of mocking wings in the accepting sky. So, the same is the case when human beings, they actually are struggling between consciousness and unconsciousness. We think of an ambition, we try to climb, and then we also see its picture in the pigeons, but then the moment we try to rise up, holy and untouched, to disappear among a history of mocking wings in the accepting sky. We can take some more poems. There is another poem from the same collection, and the poem is titled Telephone Poem. To the youngsters of today, this poem may appear to be very satirical, and at times it may also appear to be worthless, but how through this the poet actually talks about love. A voice hangs anonymously between your unspoken words. Today we have the facility of saying everything. Today also we have the facility of looking at people even while talking. But then think of a time when telephone was the only medium of communication, especially between two people far off, fine. My world breathes the distance of your face, endures the weight of an absence of promises. Spurts of tentative assurance are quickly interspersed with moments of large silence. Now, during communication over telephones, and in olden days, how even sometimes or the other the connections were not smooth, and then if it is a talk between two lovers, think of how one can try to interpret the silence. Moments of large silence, a lump in the throat betrays the silent magic, something that one wants to say, and suddenly there is a lump, there is a block of waiting without words, hastily I put into your ears two flat words, good night, and the voice clears. So, now one can find that Padhi is a magical poet who through his simple lines can actually tell us a lot, and that is why I say majority of his poems are soaked in love. We can also take the title poem from this collection entitled Going to the Temple. It has got several parts, and through this the poet not only raises some contemporary questions, but then he not only questions and then also provides some amount of answers. We can read some of the lines. How shall we begin? We shall carry long thought out ways to find a thing, name a quiet loss. We shall collect the milk white flowers from our doorsteps in due time. We shall make them sign with our morning sicknesses, prominent headaches at the feet of the dark goddess. So, when we go to the temple, fine, and suddenly we go with all sorts of problems, all sorts of anxieties, all sorts of sickness, all sorts of illness, we shall make them hold the pains as if God has got the alternative, God has got the medicine, God has got the solution to all problems. We shall make them hold the pains we have known and endured. We shall turn our cloud looks into intelligible forms, clean total gestures of fear and of love. It may not be hard then to drive all our little efforts to a reassuring smile, a cool collected look. Bury all the dead, your land will turn beautiful once more. If you happen to meet a voice that you do not recognize, then you must realize that it is mine. It is one voice that we can hear, that we often visualize, that the voice tells us that when your land will turn beautiful once more. If you happen to meet a voice that you do not recognize, then you must realize that is mine. When you arrive here, we shall invent a together hour to settle our differences and estimate a new deal. I shall answer all your hesitations and fears with a slight glance, a mere smile, a neat stone-cut look will complete my ritual of touch. So, this is how the poet actually talks about the beliefs of Indian masses, that how we go with all sorts of problems, all sorts of anxieties, all sorts of offers, and think that God has got all the solutions. And then even when we do not hear a voice, we start visualizing that when that you do not recognize the voice, then you must realize that the voice is mine. And in the third and the fourth parts, the poet says, at the crowded entrance we shall reenact childhoods, again memory, that we forget and receive back repeatedly. Remember lost deities. We have been silent for too long. Let us seek out our wishes and arrange them in their proper order. So, when we are children, we do not remember, but then let us go back once again. The stones shall hear us and begin to speak. Let us wash our hands clean of the cruel daylight. The poet also gives us a message that simply going to the temple is not enough unless and until we are ourselves clean. Let us wash our hands clean of the cruel daylight, wipe the acquired and inherited meanings of our tired faces. Inside that darkness, they would not matter anymore. So, when you have some mischievous design, can these stone walls or these gods or deities not understand? They understand everything. And finally, in the part 4, the poet says, I don't know how I can make it. Perhaps I will run down the large steps to her smile and make it my own, and make it my own. The poet in Bibhu Padhi at times also talks about place, and this place is a sort of quest which all of us are carrying within, a quest to the eternal, a quest to the sublime. So, this poem is titled A Sense of Place, and the poet says that life is a continuous journey, and every now and then, even though you are living in a present age, most of the time you are exploring something, you are perhaps retreating to a past. The place we look for is not the place we should be traveling to. I mean, the poet actually talks about the nothingness of this world and the sort of phantoms that we are struggling towards, we are moving towards. The place that we know as our own isn't the one that has stayed with us. Nothing is permanent on this earth, everything is so unreal, fine, everything is so transitory. The place we have been led to is not one that we might call our own. So, we human beings actually start boasting of our place, of our power, of our position, but the poet actually becomes very philosophical, and not only philosophical, rather he actually speaks in a very real tone and says, the place we have been led to is not one that we might call our own. The sun shines otherwise. Then in geography the air smells old, the air smells old, the light moves slow, its light falling at the place where the heart is believed to be. So, the real place is the place where your heart belongs to. We wait, but nothing shows that might have recalled in a clear way a breath lost among night and time not long ago, a place of our own, a dream of living fulfilled by all our dreams of acting. We can find in Bibhu's world dreams, past, fine, imaginations, but then the poet actually tries and wants all of us to be realistic in our approach and understand that our stay on this earth is not permanent. The earth is not a place where we have come to live forever, and that is why if you start believing that the place which you are living in is yours is actually untrue. This is not your place. Of our own, a dream of living fulfilled by all our dreams of acting. So, what actually then is the place? The place is the heart, a heart that is pure, a heart that is full of cleanliness, a heart that is free from all sorts of turbulence, a heart that is free from all sorts of jealousies. What hope is still alive that might carry us towards the desired place? A familiar name, a fond act of remembering, a place we might know and recognize. The place we have been led to by blind hands could not be one that we might call our own. The place we look for is not the place we should be traveling to. So, what is the real place? We do not know our real place. We do not know our real aim. We are all masked people, and that is why our vision, our vision is blurred. We actually start thinking something which is not permanent as permanent, but we are perhaps traveling to a different land, to a different place, and the place we consider to be our own is not our own place. Now, we can also take another collection named Games the Heart Must Play. Now, Padhi, as I have been saying, that primarily Padhi is a poet of love, love in different dimensions, love in various manifestations. In this title, I mean Games the Heart Must Play, the poet actually talks about three sorts of, because it is a trilogy of love poems where there are three sections. One section is Dream Children, then Today, and then Daughter. Now, why this collection is very important is it actually moves between present and past, and the poet has in a very beautiful manner composed, and also at times the poet satirizes, takes a digs at the present condition of the world. He actually tries to laugh at the consumerist culture that has actually blinded us. We are living fine, we are living like people who do not have the sense of their place, as we have discussed earlier. So, there is a sort of longing for love and life in this collection, where the poet not only talks about what sort of life we are living in, what sort of life we are actually thinking to strive after, but at the same time the poet also talks about the discrimination spread out in the society between the boy and the girl, between the birth of a boy and the birth of a girl, and then the sort of maltreatment which is being given to the daughters or to the girls in general. The poet also talks about all those children who actually do not have somebody to take their care or somebody to care for them. So one can also find that humanity, what sort of humanity is it when we are having a sort of deserted outlook? And the poet says, what right have we over the sprawling desert of humanity? What right we have to add to our own deserts? By deserts, actually he means the sort of dryness where there is no emotion, where there is no stability, where sentiments are perhaps for a different world. To our own deserts of the heart and the mind, when we already know that we could not possibly help a single seed grow into its own tree. It actually gives us a picture of the modern world where we are living in a wasteland and we are thinking of sowing seeds so that the tree will grow up. But then the poet says it's not the real condition. The real condition is that we are living in an age where our hearts are all parched, where our hearts are all dry, we are devoid of all sorts of emotion. And that is why what we are waiting for, we are actually waiting for rains, the rains of fertility. Rain has been a permanent, a theme in the poems of Bibhu Padhi, and where he says, but then the erratic rains had started falling and we were required back elsewhere. We walked back, your umbrella offering me my much needed shelter. So in this poem, I mean this has been taken from one of the sections, and in this poem the poet actually thinks of an imaginative daughter so that he could be, I mean the persona of the poet could be led by when he could have caught the fingers, when he could have got a shelter. The poet also talks about how the old people, how the senior citizens are often left, fine, and then their sons are not in a position to take their care, and that is why he says, let me think of those dream children, let me think of those daughters whose umbrella can save me not only from the scorching rays of the sun but also from the rains. So there is actually a yearning for a shelter, and this shelter can be provided or offered by none other than a daughter. So if one can go through the entire collection, one can find how the poet's heart weeps at the mentality of those parents who actually make a sort of discrimination between a boy and a girl, and they do not provide a sort of equal opportunity and treatment to boy as well as to girl. Then comes migratory days. Let us also, because it will be very difficult for me to talk about all the poems, but I can simply try to familiarize you with some of the collections. This migratory days is again very symbolic, where the poet talks about 3 journeys, and these are travel journeys. So a travel diary of 3 places, namely of Hyderabad, Trivandrum and Calcutta. Now here the poet actually comes out of the background of Cuttack, and here he talks about 3 places, namely 3 cities, Hyderabad, Trivandrum and Calcutta, and these journeys were undertaken because of some need or the other. So here travel has been used as a metaphor, but then through this travel the poet actually talks about some larger meanings, some larger realities, the conflict between the mind and the matter, and then how he says that when a person is displaced, he may himself feel to be lonely. But then he says, when you are displaced, this displacement actually brings you closer to another human beings. All of us are actually moving towards a sort of uncertainty, and that is why we should never think that there is a certainty in life. We can take some of the lines where the poet actually becomes very philosophical. Rather, he tries to show us all, he tries to make us all aware of a sort of reality when he says, living is dying, living is dying. If dying is what we are told, it is. If you simply, we have been told that dying is what we are told, living is dying. When somebody leaves, it is just like death. Fine. So, he tries to find some extra meaning even in ordinary things, and hence I could not just leave. I am leaving, let us be happy, though for we all are leaving anyway for a better place. So, there is a sort of admission, there is a sort of confession that this stay on this earth is not permanent, this is temporal. Our stay is temporal on this earth, but shall be here again and sooner than you think. In the same collection, Migratory Days, there is a poem which also, even though the poem is crafted in a way when the poet has to go to visit his ailing cousin, but then through that he also tries to make a sort of poetic reality which may in course of time appear to be, because as a poet, the poet also is at times frightened of the impending reality that is before us. And so, when he got the news that his cousin was ill and he went there all of a sudden, I mean to Trivandrum, this is from the Trivandrum section, where he says, it is usual at this age, this time of the year, he must not miss a single dose, the doctor says, which matters much, otherwise there is every chance that it will return at this time every year. The doctor called each of us in separately, my cousin, his wife, me, as if there was a story in each of us, as if trying to fathom the effect of what happened in each of us, what we thought of it, and then all three of us. And the doctor says, he has improved remarkably, faster than I had thought or imagined, and it is a good sign for the future. But you must bear in mind that there is someone with you who is as important as you are. Fine. So, as I have been saying that Padhi is a poet where there is always an invisible you. Who is this invisible you? The invisible you is your own self. And the poet here says that there is someone with you who is as important as you are, someone who even now is hardly capable taking good care of himself, someone who needs love and care. I mean, the situation is such that this person has to take care of himself. But the doctor says in a way, I arrived at Prashanti Nagar, words may not be true, are in fact not, and they will be mistaken for other words, other thoughts or plans for the ear. So, there are times when we must try to understand what message is hidden in the words, because words which are already communicated or said, they may not be true, but then they are for other words as well, and then one needs to understand this. Before we wind up this talk, let me also touch upon very briefly about one very important collection which is entitled Brief Pigeons, which is out and out a collection which is full of love. And here one can find not only a sort of conversational language being used, but again all these poems are addressed to a lover or to a beloved or somebody who is very close to somebody who is very intimate. And then the poet also talks about how when a person is in love and how he becomes impatient and wants, and he conveys it in the form of a poem when he says, all the watches of the world were faster at least by half a day that day. I don't know from which of us the long wish came, the wish to know, one feels to find all the watches stopping forgetting their very own time and place. So, love is such a feeling where people want that time should stop still. And the poet, in a very subtle manner, the poet says, if all the watches of the world were faster at least by half a day, that day, if it could have been possible. But is that possible? Brief seasons find that life is full of. And then once again we are reminded of what D.H. Lawrence believed in the relationship of blood, and in the next song number 26, the poet says, love is where blood is. And in this poem you can find the use of blood several times. Love is where blood is, blood issuing out of blood, dissolving into blood. Love is where our gods are, supporting one another, enjoying each other's company. Love is where blood is, has to be. Love is actually such a feeling, but what is happening in the present day world? Is love that true? The love that we are hankering after? Perhaps not. But the poet also tries to say here that we should always think of relations. And these relations may be the relations not only of two people who are entwined in love, but also those people who are intimately related to you, traditionally who are related to you in a sort of bond, your own relatives. So, the loss of relationship is also a common theme in the poetic world of Bibhu Padhi. Again, in two poems I am tempted to take here. Today, looking at your absent photograph, I begin to wonder if the woman I am looking at is still you. Please do not come between your pictures and me. Why does one have to change? Why do we have to grow? Love is innocent. Love actually doesn't want any other force. Love doesn't want us to be mature. Love always wants us to be innocent in each other's company. And the poet says, even in absence I feel your presence. And that is why he says, your absent photograph, and I do not want, I begin to wonder if the woman I am looking at is still you. Do not come between your pictures and me. Let me visualize, let me preserve this love which perhaps I have lost. And then the last song of this collection, the song number 60, where he says, the heart remembers, because Padhi is a poet of past, Padhi is a poet of memory, remembers yesterday what happened, what didn't, what could have happened. It struggles to figure out what might happen if today were somewhere absorbed by a much stronger yesterday. The heart remembers other places, still other places that are so different, those other places, the countless rooms in which it has spent its brooding time until this room, this day. The poet says, past may appear at times to be painful, but past has got such a sort of solace that all our frustrations, all our grudges, all our wounds can get a sort of relief only in the past associations, only in the past times. And that is why he says, what happened, what didn't, what could have happened. So, one should not always think, one should not be deterministic. Rather, in Padhi's world, we find a sort of indetermination. Again, there comes another collection, that is Midnight Diary. But then I think we won't be able to, but then we can take only one poem. If indeed all time were one time and hours, you might venture forth. And it reminds me, and it can also remind you of Andrew Marvell, where he says, had I but the time and the world, this quietness, my dear lady, were no crime. And he says, but no, that is not true at all. There still remains a whole lot of things to be taken care of in the midst of other absences you need to know. We believe in the present, but perhaps we ignore the absences. And the absences keep on reoccurring, the absences keep on haunting us, and those absences are not absences, they are actually presences. So, having discussed the world of Padhi, we can also take up some comment and conclude. Padhi is a fine poet. His poetry is often heart-drenched, but always philosophically sublime, say Jeet Thayil, another contemporary poet. If we have to compare the poems of Padhi with that of Mahapatra, because in both of them are this regional, landscapes, they actually get prominent places. So, here what Bruce King says is very important. Mahapatra retreats into some mood and Padhi recalls a time when they could speak without being falsely polite. It is this small society of births, deaths, anniversaries, illness, misunderstandings, wounded friendships, friends, children within the small world of Orisha that emerges from Padhi's poems and which make his poetic world different from that of Mahapatra. What M.K. Naik says is also very significant. He says, less densely structured and more transparent, because one does not have to. There is no other meaning, because the flow is so continuous, so spontaneous, more transparent than the poetry of Mahapatra. It will actually be very difficult for many of us to unravel the world of Jayant Mahapatra, but the world of Bibhu Padhi is so transparent and the lines flow so smoothly that it appears to be equally saturated with a sort of cogitation, with a sort of quest, my dear friend, a quest for the self, a quest for the mind, a quest not for the matter, but a quest into the past, unfolding memories. So, before I come to wind up this talk, let me take some of the lines from one of his poems, Waiting for Rain, where he says, I am yet to learn how to arrange my words in an order acceptable to men or God. On the far horizon in the north, behind a solitary tree, a cloud remains entangled among ancient branches, hardly caring to know that there is a land here waiting for rain. There is a land here waiting for rain, and one can extract greater meanings. There is a heart waiting for fertility. There is a heart waiting for union. There is a heart waiting for the union of two souls. The soul lost in the past and the body still suffering. So, this continuous struggle one can find in the poetic realm of Bibhu Padhi. Thank you very much. With this, we come to the end of today's talk.